Judges chapters 5 to 8. There's a reading from Judges chapter 5 verse 1. Chapters 5 verse 1, the song of Deborah and Barak. Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day, saying, Praise you, Yahweh, for the avenging of Israel, when the people willingly offended themselves. Hear, O you kings, give ear, O you princes. Even I will sing unto Yahweh. I will sing praise to Yahweh, God of Israel. And the song continues. I will take it up at verse 28. The mother of Sisera looked out at a window and cried through the lattice, Why is this chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariot? Her wise ladies answered her, Yea, she returned answer to her. Have they not sped? Have they not divided the prey? To every man a damsel or two, to Syria a prey of divers colours, of needlework, to both sides, meat for the necks of them that take the spoil. So all thine enemies perish, O Yahweh, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might, and the land had rest 40 years. So as I said, if you read the whole chapter, you'll understand what is going on. The Song of Deborah tells of the battle from Israel's view. From verse 28, it tells expectations of King Sarah's mother. She expected him to have won the war, divided the spoil and captives among Israel, and returned joyous. Instead, the opposite happened. Chapter 6, verse 1.
And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. And because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made them the dens which are in the mountains and caves and strongholds. And so it was, when Israel had sown, that the Midianites came up. That means when they sown all the crops and the products. And notice it's saying Israel, talking about the whole congregation, servants, everybody. So when Israel had sown their seeds and so forth, that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites and the children of the east, even they came up against them. And they encamped against them and destroyed the increase of the earth. Talking about when the seeds have blossomed and become fruits. Till thou come unto Gaza, and left no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep nor ox nor ass. For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for multitude, for both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites. And the children of Israel cried unto Yahweh. And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried unto Yahweh because of the Midianites, that Yahweh sent a prophet unto the children of Israel. So, the same thing is happening to Israel, what they did to Egypt. The crops and also of Egypt got destroyed, and the Egyptians told Pharaoh, look, they're destroying our land. Because Egypt went against the ways of God, and the same thing's happening to Israel for going against the ways of God. For their enemies coming and taking all their food and so forth. So Jacob's wives came from the children of the east. So I said, the mixed multitude of the composition of the Hebrew of Israel. We see this in Genesis chapters 29 verse 1. Moses warned their fathers of the effects of not keeping God's laws, and that they should teach each generation of children not to depart from it. Now we've seen that Joshua has died, they're reverting, and the new generation has come, they're reverting back to the ways of displaying God's laws. Deuteronomy 28 verse 30. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and thou shalt not gather the grapes thereof. So they're sowing, and they're not reaping. 28:31. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. The fruits of thy land and all thy labours shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed always. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. It's talking about the commandments of God, what the children are supposed to do in order to avoid all these things coming to them. Deuteronomy 6 verse 8. And thou shalt bind them, commandments of God again, the laws of God, for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thy eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. So I'm sure you get the picture. They were warned, and if you don't train up your child in the way they should go, as we see, they'll depart from it. Judges chapter 6 verse 11, the call of Gideon, the prophet that God sent unto them. And there came an angel of Yahweh and sat under an oak which was in Ophrah, that pertained unto Joash the Abizite, and his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of Yahweh appeared unto him and said unto him, Yahweh is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if Yahweh be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles which our fathers told us of, saying, Did not Yahweh bring us up from Egypt? But now Yahweh hath forsaken us, and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. And Yahweh looked upon him and said, Go in thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of Midianites. Have not I sent thee? Verse 20. An angel of Yahweh said unto him, Take the flesh and the unleavened cakes, and lay them upon this rock, and pour out the broth. And he did so. Then the angel of Yahweh put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand, and touched the flesh and the unleavened cakes, and there arose up fire out of the rock, and consumed the flesh and the unleavened cakes. Then the angel of Yahweh departed out of his sight. And when Gideon perceived that he was an angel of Yahweh, Gideon said, Alas, O Yahweh God, for because I have seen an angel of Yahweh face to face. Verse 24. Then Gideon built an altar there unto Yahweh, and called it Jehovah Shalom. And it came to pass the same night that Yahweh said unto him, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock, and 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down thy grove that is by it. So almost like what Abraham did. Abraham destroyed the altars of his father, and the same thing Gideon is asked to do. So by the name Gideon gave the altar, did he perceive it was God in human form talking to him so Gideon could see him? Remember, he did it with Abraham, Genesis chapters 18 verse 1 and 33. So both Abraham and Gideon's fathers were idol worshippers, as I said, yet God called a son who remembered the real God and his name. Gideon destroys the altar of Baal, Judges chapter 6 verse 28. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and a grove was cut down that was by it. And the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. And they said one to another, Who hath done this? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, hath done this thing. Then the men of the city said unto Joash, Bring out thy son that he may die, because he hath cast down the altar of Baal, and because he hath cut down the grove that was by it. And Joash said unto all that stood against him, Will ye plead for Baal? Will you save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death, whilst it is yet morning. If he be a god, let him plead for himself, because one hath cast down his altar. Therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he has thrown down his altar. Chapter 6, verse 36, the sign of the fleece. And Gideon said unto God, If thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast said, behold, I will put a fleece of wool in the floor, and if the dew be on the fleece only, and it be dry upon all the earth beside, then shall I know that thou wilt save Israel by my hand. As thou hast said, and it was so, for he rose up early in the morning, or all early tomorrow, the next day, and thrust the fleece, and thrust the fleece together, and wringed the dew out of the fleece, and a bowl full of water. And Gideon said unto God, Let not thine anger be hot against me, and I will speak but this once. Let me prove, I pray thee, but this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry only upon the fleece, and upon all the ground let it be dew. And God did so that night, for it was dry upon only the fleece, and there was dew on it. So basically what Gideon's doing is proving that the voice he's hearing in his head, or perceived to be God, is of God. So he's asking God to do a miracle to prove that it is of him. He took a sheep's skin, which is called a fleece, put it on the ground and said to God, God, make this fleece, in the morning, make this fleece wet with dew and the ground around it dry. That would be a miracle. And he did it. Again, just to make sure, Gideon asked for it the other way around. So the ground will be wet and the fleece will be dry, and it did. That's how we know that God is God talking to us when we ask for a miracle as a sign. People say God told me this and God told me that. Okay, so many people today claim to hear and have conversations with God. Even hearing messages they pass on to others claiming it came from God. God gave me a message for you, and so on. I do not see a biblical precept for so many people, especially who are not of Israel, hearing from God and messages that do not affect the nation of Israel. Remember, this message of Gideon, to Gideon and all the prophets, affected the whole nation of Israel. And they were taken to people, the kings, the leaders, who were able to change the course of the whole nation. 1 Corinthians 14 verse 26. How is it then, brethren, when you come together, every one of you have a psalm, have a doctrine, have a tongue, have a revelation, have an interpretation, that all things be done unto edifying. Yes, it's for the church of God, the congregation of God, not individual people or so forth. 1 John 4:1, Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try, as Gideon did, the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out of the world. So everyone wants to be God, wants to be a prophet, wants to be things, and God speaking to them. Chapter 7 verse 1, Gideon's 300 men. Then Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him rose up early and pitched beside the well of Harrods, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them, by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And Yahweh said unto Gideon, The people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel basically think they did it, vaunt themselves against me, saying, Mine own hand hath saved me. Now therefore go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 20 and 2,000, and there remained 10,000. And Yahweh said unto Gideon, The people are yet too many. Bring them down unto the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, This shall go with thee, the same shall go with thee. And of whomsoever I say unto thee, This shall not go with thee, the same shall not go with thee. Verse 5. So he brought down the people unto the water, and Yahweh said unto Gideon, Every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shall thou set by himself. Likewise every one that bowed down unto his knees to drink. Verse 6. And the number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, were 300 men, but all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink. And Yahweh said unto Gideon, By 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand, and let all the other people go, every man to his place. Verse 13. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told of a dream unto his fellow, and said, Behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it that it fell, and overturned it that the tent lay along. And his fellow answered and said, This is nothing less save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for into his hand hath God delivered the delivered Midian and all the hosts. Verse 15. And it was so, when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation, see what interpretation means? Not to translate, but to understand what the thing means. Everyone heard the dream here, heard it in the language, but the interpretation of it, what does it mean? So this speaking in tongues interpretation business is not translation. We covered this earlier on with Joseph and his dreams and so forth. So, verse 15, and it was so when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and interpretation thereof, that he worshipped and returned into the host of Israel, and said, Arise, for Yahweh hath delivered into your hand the host of Midianites. My comment, the account of Gideon and the servant resembles that of Jonathan and his armor-bearer in two ways. We see this in 1 Samuel chapter 14, verses 6 to 13. 1 Samuel 14:6, and Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armour, Come, and let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that Yahweh will work for us, for there is no restraint in Yahweh to save by many or by few. Also, as with Joseph, we see interpret, which I just explained, means to explain, and meaning not to translate one language into a human language, as tongues people do today. Okay, I'm reading fast because the battery is about to run out. So, going on to chapter 8, verse 4, Gideon defeats Zebah and Zalmunna. And Gideon came to Jordan and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint yet pursuing them. And he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray thee, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they be faint, and mean hungry, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of the Midian. And the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thy hand, that we should give bread unto thine army? And Gideon said, Therefore, when Yahweh hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness with their briars, meaning the bushes with thorns on them. Judges chapter 8, verse 16. And he took the elders of the city and the thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. So I said this resembles the account of David and Nabal, i.e. in 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 22. So and more, which says, and so and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave all that pertain to him by the morning light in the on the war. So this is when David was running away from King Saul, and he was hungry, and his men went and asked Nabal for food, and Nabal refused to give him food, and read the rest of the story. Gideon's ephod. Judges chapter 8, verse 22. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule over us, both thou and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Yahweh shall rule over you. 27. And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put it in his city, even in Ophrah, and all Israel went there a whoring after it, which thing became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more, and the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. Chapter 8, verse 29, Gideon dies. And Jerubbaal, which is Gideon, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 70 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine, means someone who's not his first wife, that was in Shechem. She also bare him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in the good old age, and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father, in Ophrah of the Abizarites. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a whoring after Baalim, and made Baal-berith their god. So see, Baal is the name of the false god, and Berith is so Baal means Lord, and Berith is the name of the false god. So the story of Israel constantly turning away from God, he's sending redeemers as judges, prophets, and finally his son, will be repeated as we read through the Bible. Why does Israel prefer to worship other gods? Is it because it is more fun? They allow them to be promiscuous and has lower standards? Worship involves dancing, enjoyable singing and noise, etc., as Exodus chapter 32, verse 17, when Moses came down from speaking with God. Sounds like many worship sessions today. Are they to other gods under the guise of being to Yahweh God, especially when taught the law no longer has to be kept for whatever false explanations given, which is the teaching of most Christian congregations and denominations today? Leave you to read the whole story at your prescribed speed, and we'll continue tomorrow. Shalom.